You get the thing you've been chasing, the promotion, the relationship, the new phone. For a few days, it feels incredible. Then, without even noticing, you're already fixated on the next thing you don't have. You told yourself getting there would finally be enough. It never is. And it's not because you're greedy or ungrateful or broken. It's because of one chemical running your brain, and it was never built to let you feel satisfied. This is The Molecule of More by psychiatrist Daniel Z. Lieberman and Michael E. Long. And it explains something most people never figure out. Wanting something and enjoying something are not the same feeling. They're not even the same chemical. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why more never feels like enough. Not as a character flaw, but as brain chemistry doing its job a little too well. You'll see why love cools, why cravings outlast pleasure, why some people can't stop building and others can't stop wanting, and why the finish line you keep almost reaching keeps quietly moving. And you'll walk away with the one shift that actually lets you feel like you have enough. Starting tonight. Chapter 1. Love. Start with the easiest one to feel, love. Think about the first few weeks of a relationship that mattered to you. The way a text lit something up in your chest. The way you replayed a 5-minute conversation for 3 days. That wasn't chemistry in the poetic sense. It was chemistry in the literal sense. Dopamine. Here's the thing about dopamine. It doesn't fire because something is good. It fires because something is uncertain, new, unwritten. Early in a relationship, almost everything about the other person is a question mark. Will they text back? Will they like you? Where is this going? Your brain treats every unanswered question like a tiny lottery ticket, and dopamine keeps you playing. You've probably felt this outside of love, too. The Friday afternoon buzzing with plans for the weekend can feel better than the weekend itself. The anticipation, it turns out, is often the loudest part of the whole ride. That's why the same person who felt electric in month 1 can start to feel quiet by month 8. Nothing went wrong. The mystery just resolved. You know their order at the coffee shop now. You know how they'll react to bad news. The question marks turned into answers, and dopamine, which only cares about what might happen next, has nothing left to respond to. Most people read that as the relationship dying. It's not. It's one chemical system finishing its job and handing off to another. The book calls it the difference between passionate love and companionate love. And companionate love doesn't run on dopamine at all. It runs on oxytocin, on the here and now, chemicals your body releases through touch, through routine, through simply being near someone you trust. It's a quieter feeling. Less of a spark, more of a floor under your feet. Here's where people get stuck. They go looking for the spark to come back. In the same relationship or a new one, instead of learning to feel the floor. And this isn't only about romance. It's the same reason a hobby stops exciting you once you're good at it. The same reason a job that once felt thrilling starts to feel like a routine. Certainty is the price of mastery, and dopamine was never going to stick around to pay it. So if something in your life has gone quiet, not bad, just quiet, that's not proof it's broken. It might just mean the wanting has finished its job, and it's your turn to notice what's still actually there. And here's the useful part the book points to. You can actually borrow a little of that early spark back on purpose. Not by manufacturing drama, but by manufacturing novelty. A trip neither of you has taken, a skill you're both bad at learning together, a conversation about something you've genuinely never discussed. Dopamine doesn't care that you've been together 5 years. It only cares whether the next 10 minutes are predictable. Give it something it hasn't mapped yet, and it wakes back up, even inside something old and steady. But love is the gentle version of this story. There's a much rougher one. What happens when this exact craving circuit gets hijacked on purpose by something built specifically to never let it rest? Chapter 2. Drugs. Picture someone in the grip of addiction, not the movie version, the real one. Late at night, reaching for the same drink, the same pills, the same app, even though some part of them, maybe even most of them, doesn't want to. That detail makes no sense until you understand this next idea. Wanting and liking are not the same system in your brain. Dopamine handles the wanting. A completely different set of chemicals, opioids, among others, handle the liking, the actual pleasure of a thing once you have it. In a healthy brain, these two mostly move together. You want a good meal, you eat it, you like it. Wanting drops. Done. Addiction breaks that link. It floods the wanting circuit far past anything food, sex, or connection ever could, while the liking side barely moves, or goes numb entirely. That's why so many people in active addiction say some version of the same haunting sentence. I don't even enjoy it anymore. I just need it. That's not an exaggeration. That's the literal split between two brain systems. One screaming for more, the other no longer responding when it gets it. There's a second cruelty built into this. 2. Tolerance. The more the wanting circuit gets flooded, the more it recalibrates its baseline. So the same hit that used to feel enormous starts to feel like nothing at all, and it takes more of it just to feel normal again. That's the ratchet that turns a habit into a dependency. Not one bad decision. 1,000 tiny recalibrations, each one raising the price of feeling okay. And here's the part that should make you a little uncomfortable. This isn't a special addict brain. It's your brain on a smaller dial. Every time you check a notification that probably isn't important. Every time you reopen an app 4 minutes after closing it. Every extra episode at midnight when you told yourself one more and meant it. Same circuit. Different volume. The reason these platforms feel so hard to put down isn't a lack of willpower. It's design. Unpredictable rewards are the most addictive kind because dopamine loves a question mark more than it loves a guarantee. A slot machine doesn't pay out every time. On purpose. Neither does a feed that sometimes shows you something amazing and mostly shows you nothing. Your brain can't tell the difference between a casino and a phone. It just knows. Might be something good in there. Check again. This is the part of the book that stops being abstract and starts being personal. Because once you can name the gap between wanting something and actually liking it, you start catching yourself mid-reach, noticing the itch instead of just obeying it. That single second of noticing is the whole game. It's the difference between a habit that owns you and a craving you're finally watching from the outside. But not everyone loses that fight the same way. Some people seem almost immune to this pull. Cool-headed, strategic, able to wait years for a payoff everyone else would have cashed in early. That's not a different personality. That's a different dopamine job. Chapter 3. Domination. There's a version of dopamine most people never hear about because it doesn't feel like craving at all. It feels like discipline. The book splits dopamine's job into two very different roles. One is the desire circuit, the one you just met, the one that wants, that craves, that lives entirely in the moment of almost having something. The other is the control circuit, the one responsible for planning, for strategy, for looking 5 moves ahead and choosing the harder, smarter path on purpose. Same chemical. 2 completely different jobs. Most people run mostly on desire. It's not a character flaw. It's just the louder, older system. But the people who tend to rise to the top of a company, a team, a competition, usually aren't the ones with the strongest cravings. They're the ones whose control circuit has learned to outvote the desire circuit again and again in small moments nobody's watching. Skipping the thing that feels good right now for the thing that pays off later. Not once. Repeatedly, as a default setting. Here's the identity shift hiding in that idea. Self-control was never about being a person who doesn't want things. Everyone wants things. That part of the brain doesn't turn off. It's about which circuit gets the final vote. The person who has no willpower and the person who seems to have unlimited discipline are often running the exact same craving underneath. One just built a stronger habit of letting the control circuit answer first. You can actually see the 2 circuits fight it out in real time if you pay attention to yourself. The desire circuit wants you to spend the bonus the day it lands. The control circuit is the quiet voice, suggesting you invest half of it and forget it exists. The desire circuit wants the argument won right now, tonight, at full volume. The control circuit is the one that says, sleep on it, you'll say this better tomorrow. Neither voice ever fully wins for good. The people who seem the most together have just gotten very good at making sure the second voice gets the last word, most of the time. And this is where real power comes from, according to the book. Not from being the loudest or the most aggressive, but from being the one who can wait, calculate, and act on a longer timeline than everyone else in the room. Chess, not impulse. So if you've ever felt like you're competing against people who simply want success more than you do, that's probably not what's happening. They've likely just trained the quieter circuit to speak louder than the loud one. And that's trainable. It's not talent. It's repetition. But this same control circuit, the one that makes some people brilliant strategists, has a strange cousin. A version of dopamine turned up so high, it stops helping you plan the future and starts inventing one that isn't real. Chapter 4. creativity and madness. Some of the most original minds in history, and some of the most fractured ones, share the same brain chemistry turned up to the same volume. Dopamine isn't just about wanting things, it's about noticing connections, seeing that two unrelated ideas might actually be related. That's the raw material of creativity, a brain willing to ask, what if, about things most people never question. The book explains that people high in this kind of dopamine sensitivity tend to see more possibilities everywhere. More meaning, more pattern, more, what if this connects to that? That's a gift, right up until it isn't. Turn that same sensitivity up too far, and the brain starts finding patterns that aren't actually there. A coincidence stops feeling like a coincidence. A stranger's glance feels aimed at you specifically. The line between brilliant insight and delusion isn't a different brain system. It's the same one, at a different intensity. Sometimes in the same person, sometimes just weeks apart. The book leans on real, uncomfortable stories to make this land. A mind that starts out simply unusually perceptive, connecting things faster than everyone around it, admired for it even, and slowly starts connecting things that were never actually there to connect. Not a switch flipping, a dial turning, one notch at a time, until insightful quietly becomes unwell. You don't need a diagnosis for this idea to matter to you. Almost everyone has met the version of themselves that's a little too dopamine lit, up at 2 a.m., convinced this is the idea, the plan, the pivot, the person, and just as convinced by morning that it wasn't. That's not you being unstable. That's the same circuit that makes you creative, occasionally overshooting. The lesson isn't to dim that part of yourself. It's to know when to trust it and when to let it cool before you act on it. The best ideas usually survive a second look. The ones that don't are usually the dopamine talking, not the truth. This is actually how a lot of genuinely brilliant, genuinely stable people operate. Not by trusting every 2 a.m. spark equally, but by building a filter around it. Sleep on the idea before you commit money to it. Say it out loud to someone who'll tell you the truth, not just someone who'll get excited with you. Give it a week and see if it still feels true in daylight. That single habit, pausing between the spark and the action, is often the entire difference between the version of this trait that changes your life and the version that wrecks it. And it turns out this same trait, this appetite for what if, doesn't just shape individual minds. Zoom out far enough, and it splits entire rooms of otherwise reasonable people into two completely different views of what the world should become. Chapter 5. Politics. Here's an idea that'll make you look at every argument at the dinner table a little differently. The divide between two political sides might not start with values at all. It might start with brain chemistry. The book found that people whose brains lean more heavily on dopamine, future-focused, abstract, hungry for progress and novelty, tend to land on the more liberal end of things. People whose brains lean more on the here and now chemicals, grounded in tradition, tangible experience, present moment loyalty to family and community, tend to land more conservative. Neither wiring is a malfunction. They're two different survival strategies your species has always needed at the same time. One line from the book cuts right through the noise here. Liberals want to help people become better. Conservatives want to let people be happy as they already are. Both of those are genuinely caring positions. They're just aimed at different things. One is future-oriented improvement. The other is present-oriented contentment. You need both operating in the same society, the way a car needs both a gas pedal and a set of brakes. Notice this isn't about who's right. It's about why the same set of facts can produce two people who are both being completely sincere and still land in opposite places. The dopamine-heavy brain looks at a problem and sees an opportunity to build something better. The H and N-heavy brain looks at the same problem and sees something risky being changed that was actually working fine. Both of them are protecting something real. This matters way outside of elections, too. It's the same split you'll find between you and the people closest to you. The partner who wants to try the new restaurant versus the one who wants the usual booth at the usual place. The friend who's always chasing the next city, the next job, the next reinvention, next to the one who's built a whole happy life standing still. Neither one is doing it wrong. They're just running different chemistry. Once you can see that, the next argument with someone wired differently than you stops feeling like a fight about who's correct and starts feeling like two operating systems trying to talk to each other. That alone changes how you argue and who you're actually able to hear. It even reframes people you disagree with the most. The relative who won't stop talking about the way things used to be isn't necessarily closed-minded. Their whole chemistry is built to protect what's proven to work. The friend who's constantly reinventing their career, their beliefs, their entire personality isn't necessarily flaky. Their chemistry is built to chase what's next. You don't have to agree with either instinct to stop being baffled by it, which raises the bigger question. If this split runs through every relationship and every debate, what does it mean for an entire species built this way? Chapter 6. Progress. Zoom out as far as you can, and this same chemical explains something bigger than any one person's life. Why your species can't stop building, and can't stop being dissatisfied with what it's already built. Every species on Earth is wired to want things it doesn't have. But humans got an unusually large dose of the circuitry that runs on abstraction. The part that can imagine a future that doesn't exist yet and feel genuinely pulled toward making it real. That's not a small upgrade. That's the reason you're watching this on a screen instead of reading it by firelight. Cities, medicine, rockets, the internet. All of it traces back to a species that was never able to just sit still and be content with good enough. Here's the catch. The book doesn't let you look away from. The exact same wiring that built civilization guarantees civilization will never feel finished. Dopamine doesn't have an off switch that flips once you've achieved enough. It just points at the next gap. Which is why a species with longer lifespans, less disease, and more comfort than any generation in history can still, somehow, feel like everything is falling apart. Progress and dissatisfaction aren't opposites. They're the same engine. You've felt this personally, probably more than once. You hit the income you said would finally be enough, and within a season you'd already recalculated what enough means. You got the body, the title, the apartment, and the goalpost didn't wait a week before it moved again. That's not you being ungrateful. That's the same molecule that built the pyramids, refusing to let its own species rest. This is where a lot of people quietly give up on ambition altogether, deciding that if satisfaction is always going to move away from them, there's no point chasing anything. That's the wrong lesson. The point was never to finally catch it. The point is understanding that the chase itself was never going to deliver peace, so you stop waiting for the finish line to hand you something it was never built to give. This is also, quietly, the mechanism behind burnout. Not working too many hours, chasing a version of enough that was never going to arrive, and mistaking the exhaustion for a sign you just haven't achieved enough yet. So you push harder, hit the next milestone, feel the 2-day glow, and go looking for the next one. The treadmill isn't a metaphor. It's a fairly literal description of what a dopamine-only life feels like from the inside, motion without arrival. Which leaves one real question. If the wanting never turns off, what actually does? Chapter 7. Harmony. The answer isn't turning dopamine off. You couldn't if you tried, and you wouldn't want to. It's the same chemical behind your ambition, your creativity, your ability to imagine a better version of your life at all. The answer is learning to run two systems on purpose instead of living entirely inside one of them. Here's the actual shift the book lands on. Dopamine handles the future. The here and now chemicals handle the present. Most people, most of the time, are only running one of those. Either stuck chasing the next thing with no ability to enjoy what's already here, or so anchored in comfort that they never build toward anything at all. The people who actually feel at peace aren't the ones who've silenced their wanting. They're the ones who've learned when to let it lead, and when to hand the wheel to the part of them that can just be somewhere, fully. That looks smaller than you'd expect in real life. It's not a retreat to a mountain. It's noticing the actual taste of the coffee instead of drinking it while planning the next 4 hours. It's sitting with someone you love without half composing the message you're going to send after. It's finishing something you worked hard for and actually letting yourself feel it land for 1 full minute before your brain starts pricing out the next goal. None of that requires less ambition. If anything, it makes ambition sustainable. Because a person who can feel satisfied doesn't need to burn out chasing satisfaction from achievement alone. You get to keep the drive that built everything you're proud of without needing it to also be the only thing keeping you steady. Think of it less like choosing between the two systems and more like alternating who's driving. Let dopamine drive when you're building, planning, reaching. That's what it's for, and it's genuinely good at it. Then, deliberately, hand the wheel to the quieter system once you've arrived somewhere worth noticing. Most people never make that handoff on purpose. They just let the same system drive the whole way, wondering why the destination never feels like enough once they get there. Remember the moment this whole video opened on? Getting the thing, feeling it fade, already halfway to wanting the next one. That's not a flaw in you. That's the wanting circuit doing exactly its job, the same job it's done for every human who ever built anything worth having. The problem was never that you wanted more. The problem was expecting the wanting to also hand you peace. It was never built for that. Something else in you was. So the goal isn't to want less. It's to notice, on purpose, the moment you already have something, and let yourself actually be there for it, even just for a second, before you go build the next thing. So here's what changes now. That gap you feel every time you get the thing you wanted, the promotion, the relationship, the version of yourself you finally became, it was never a flaw. It's dopamine, doing exactly what it's always done, pointing you toward the next what if, the second the current one stops being a question. There was never going to be a finish line. There isn't one waiting for you either. But now you know the difference between the chase and the catch. You know why the spark fades, why the craving outlasts the pleasure, why the goalpost keeps quietly moving, and why the people who seem happiest aren't the ones who stopped wanting. They're the ones who finally learned how to arrive. Tonight, pick one thing you already have. A person, a skill, a win you rushed past, and actually sit with it for 60 seconds. That's the whole practice. If this changed how you see your own wanting, subscribe.